So, hello everyone. Good morning. It's great to have you on another WE-CAN Virtual Cafe for women entrepreneurs. Many of you have been a part of our virtual cafes in the past. I know there's still some more who will be joining us. Today, I just want to introduce myself. If you've never met me, my name is Kerry Ramsay, and I'm the project manager for the WE-CAN project, which is led by Queen's University. And of course, we have been now around for about 5.5 years. And during that time, we've served more than 1,600 women entrepreneurs, of which many of you have been a part of that process. Thank you so much for being back. It's your voices in these virtual cafes that really do add to the depth and the wisdom, because there is just so much wisdom in the room, and we like to tap into that, right? So today's topic, of course, is one I think that most of us have probably encountered at some point in our business, which is this idea of dealing with difficult customers and clients. If you're brand new to business, just wait. That difficult customer or client, will show up eventually, because that's just par for the course. And when it happens, don't get all dismayed. Hopefully today will help to equip you in a way that helps you to handle maybe some of those situations. As we're getting started today, I do want to invite you to introduce yourselves in the Zoom chat. So please feel free. If you would like to let folks know where you're connecting from or what your business is. Many of you have virtual businesses. So even if you're outside of the Kingston area, there might be potential clients or referral partners for you, even on this call today. So I'll leave it to you to introduce yourselves in the Zoom chat. Feel free to include a link if you'd like. As you're doing that, I'll acknowledge that Queen's University is situated on the ancestral territory of the Huron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. And of course, in just a few days, we have National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, which is coming. And so I am a white settler myself, and so I am always looking for ways to amplify my own understanding of Indigenous culture. And if it's helpful, I thought I'd pass along a resource to you. Oh, this is really difficult when we have blurry things here, but I'm going to tell you what the name of it is. Oh, I'll just tell you. It's the newest book by Susan Aglukark, who, of course, is a Canadian singer-songwriter, now author. The name of the book, which I'll probably type in the chat because you can't see it very well, is Kihane, and it is a memoir of healing. Susan is an Inuit woman who has suffered, amongst other things, intergenerational trauma, um, you know, you know, bias and racism, all sorts of things that fall often to Indigenous communities. Highly recommend this book from an Indigenous woman's perspective. And if you're looking, like I say, to amplify your own understanding of Indigenous culture, I strongly recommend. It's just everywhere. It's at your Indigo, at your independent bookstore. It's called Kihiane, Kihiani, and just go in and ask for Susan Aglukar's latest book and check it out. It is fantastic. I read it for cover to cover in a single weekend. That's how good it was. All right, so let's dive into today's topic. So the way that we structure our virtual cafes is I will facilitate by asking a series of questions, and the questions are meant to really generate discussion. Now, if you're an introvert like me, I love you dearly, but we also have to participate in order to make these discussions a real discussion. So some from time to time, I find the extroverts kick it off, and the introverts hang back and they sort of think a little bit, and then but we are looking to anyone and everyone who would like to participate, who has a thought. On that note, just let me lay a ground rule that if you could keep your comments to about, 2 or 3 minutes, that will allow us to have as many voices heard during this 1 hour session as possible. All right, so thank you so much for being a part of this. So what I thought we'd kick it off with is this idea of red flags. So for those of you maybe who have dealt with a difficult customer or client in the past, is there now, are there any red flags that signal to you that, oh my, I might be heading into a difficult client situation here? And maybe you've even learned how to, head some of those off at the pass. I don't know. So anybody who would like to start with that, maybe you've dealt with a difficult client or customer in the past. Jen, I just noticed Leah is on the call. Thank you. And so would anybody like to sort of, maybe even for the rest of us, for the benefit, what's a red flag? How do you get an inkling, even intuition wise, that perhaps this is someone who might be causing me some challenges in the future? And if you don't want to start, I will, because I've had my share. Joanne, though, we will let you kick it off and I'll slide in at some point as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, because a few things came to mind right away. So I'm a career coach, and I work with outplacement companies and the benefits companies. They send me clients.
Right.
So the initial, and this goes also with my own practice. So most of the time, always, the first call is always good, but every now and then I get somebody that starts questioning me, or I can see, well, I've done this. Well, yeah, I'm done. It's anything I say is and although at first I was like, okay, well, I can adjust. Yes, they know, maybe, I can teach them something and all this, but it always backfires. So I've learned
Mm,
that those red flags to me, like if they start, like they're not into it, or they feel what I'm telling them is not true, or they're, well, I've done it differently. Well, this I've done this all the time, or is so now when I get that, I go back
mm.
to the supplier and said, this is not a good fit.
Ooh, and I was just thinking those words as you were saying that. And that's a great way to come back. Like, I'm not sure this is a good fit because what's going to happen is we're going to end up bending and becoming a pretzel and possibly stepping out of alignment with what we actually are in business to do and all of those things. Okay, thanks. That's an awesome example. Thank you. So a red flag, this might be a client that becomes difficult for me. And being able to spot that in the first few minutes or even consultation call is helpful. Anyone else sort of come across a red flag? Maybe you've been in business longer than some, and you just want to share that as well. Yeah, Jennifer, sorry, Heather. I don't know why
Um,
I looked at your name and said Jennifer. That's
that's
odd.
okay. I look
Go
like a
ahead.
Jennifer. You know what? Someone who's really disorganized.
Mm,
You know,
yeah,
unless you've mastered being able to get them organized, but when they're really all disorganized and all over the place and don't really know what they want.
yeah,
Not just that they don't know what you want, because lots of times I don't know what I want, but just being scattered all over the.
sure. Okay, fair.
Yeah.
For me, I find it's also a lack of communication. Like if I'm sending emails, they're not responding. That to me is, and I just happen to be someone who sends emails, because I sent you 5 emails for this workshop alone. So, I mean, it's like I will communicate, but if you're not also reciprocating, I don't know this is a good fit because I need someone who's in communication with me. That's an early flag for me. Helen, over to you. What is a red flag that someone might become a difficult client or customer?
Um, it's funny about the disorganization. I'm a virtual assistant
Mm.
slash operations manager. I love disorganized people because I wouldn't have a job without
You
them.
help fix them. Yeah.
The red flag for me is people who aren't decisive. If they
Mm,
don't know what they want, or they can't
yes.
really describe to you what the project is or what the ongoing responsibilities would be,
Yeah.
that's when I know
Love it.
it's not going to make me happy.
Good. A great early indicator. Maybe some work has to happen before I can help you to the fullest. Okay,
Yeah.
love that. Mackenzie, over to you, the last word on this question, and we'll head into some other ones. Thanks for that, Helen.
Yeah, for me, one that comes up sometimes, for reference for those of you who didn't see in the chat, I'm a therapist. So sometimes I have folks that are going through a really tough time, and it's not with everyone that I work with, but on occasion there's somebody who like really needs me for something, and I'm not a emergency based like service. So if there's someone like demanding my time on like evenings or weekends when I'm out of the office, I first like to try to start with like, well, how can we take care of you in those in between moments? And
Mm,
but if it's constantly like pushing and pressing for my time, then maybe I would consider referring out to a therapist that's available on evenings or they have a wider availability that I do because that's one of my boundaries just for my own well-being and self-care to protect my time and my work hours, so to speak.
I love that. And so anyone who indicates from an early point that they're going to be pushing boundaries, oh, that timing doesn't work for me. Can we meet outside of that? Sorry, I might not be the right fit for you. And
Mhm.
have being able to refer. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. I love that. Okay. I love that. Thanks. So thanks for those red flags, just to kind of ease us into that conversation. So now I'm also curious if anyone has a scenario that they'd like to share with us, and I prefer not to use, the names of people or businesses. Let's not shame or blame anyone. But was there an instance maybe where you dealt with a difficult client or customer, and what did you learn from it? That's sort of what I would love to like bring it around to. Was there a situation where you dealt with someone, it wasn't so a shiny, happy moment, but then at the end of it, you kind of learned something as a business owner, because we can't always avoid conflict, right? As much as I personally am a conflict avoider, like definitely. A lot of women I coach tend to be, slash people pleaser, I guess is the other part of that. So, does anyone have a scenario that they wanted to share, that maybe we can learn from and that possibly you learned from as well? I'll throw that out there. It's a lot to ask, but if somebody is comfortable sharing one of those situations, we're happy to hear from you. I'll let you think about it for a moment. I'll take a sip of my drink here. So Leah, I think that, yeah, Leah, do you want to explain that one? Did she give an example did you give an example in the chat, or was that something else?
There is an example in the chat. So Leah says, the project that I was working on with someone else, we shared it with the organization, and our idea was taken and run with it without our involvement. And so now it's out there and mistakes have happened, and no one has taken accountability for it yet, even though I have raised that question. And I mean, what they're doing is based on our language and our lived experience. And now this other organization with no lived experience is taking and running it with it. They don't know the full story. I don't want to step on toes and cause more harm, but it's been a very disappointing situation.
Mm. So Leah, let me ask you, what did you learn from that situation that maybe you would do differently next time?
Don't trust politicians.
So like, would there be something, was it in writing? Was there like, so, because I want to lead into some ways and some systems we can set up that help us with conflict resolution and maybe avoiding it in the first place. Was there anything else that you think that as a business owner you would do next time a little differently?
Sign a contract.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
never got paid for this. There was
Mm,
no contract. They made assumptions. And so sometimes I need to hold on to the idea before I present it and
mm,
end up with it being
yeah.
taken away. I sent multiple emails over a period of months, and it's like I was ghosted. They did not come back
Mm,
to me.
yeah.
I I contacted a lawyer just for information of what are my rights, and some of their wording I put into a letter. And when it came back to me, there were still misunderstandings of, I mean, I felt trapped in this.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you can recognize me, but the idea is already out there, and it's a hearing organization that took over, and they won't accept
Okay.
that responsibility.
Mm. So thank you for that example. Let's then talk about, thanks, Leah. Let's talk about some of those systems that maybe some of you have put into place to help protect against, dealing with some difficult clusters of clients, maybe some things that you've learned along the way that when I ask that question, you're like, oh, actually, yeah, now I use contracts. Like that is something protected me because I learned that early on? Like, are there any systems, any ways that have been implemented into your business that help you now prevent conflict sometimes, even before there's a potential for it to happen? Yeah, go ahead, Heather. I know you're on the train. Go ahead.
I am. So as long as you can hear me, I won't turn my video on, but
Yeah, turn your volumes up. She's on the train and doesn't want to holler too loud. Go ahead,
no,
Heather.
I don't want to holler too loud. A questionnaire up front, finding out more information as much as possible.
Great.
I once had a client who had a diagnosis and it was unaware, and on the day that I was working with them, that presented itself and I was not aware, and so I took it personally. But now I ask the question up front, is there anything you'd like to disclose to me about your personality up front to help better understand what I'm dealing with?
Interesting. Yeah. So conflict that you had had that taught you, maybe I need to put that question, and not, again, not to disqualify someone for becoming a client, but so that you can understand better what you're dealing with even. Anyone else who has implemented processes, whether that's onboarding, I mean, to me, that sounds like an onboarding process that Heather was just talking about, or, communication tools or methods that help us even to prevent some of these misunderstandings from happening. Really, what we're talking about is establishing clearer communication almost right from the onset. Yeah, go ahead, Selena. What are your thoughts?
So I'm a respiratory therapist at Kingston Oxygen, and so I see clients that I refer to as patients. And we have developed a contract for them to sign for us when we sell a machine to them. I sell CPAP machines, or I used to, and so we developed something for them to sign to acknowledge that we'd review this, because you'd have people come in later say, nobody ever told me this, nobody ever did this. So yeah, that's what we've developed. Contracts, like Leah said, get things in writing basically. And I even had a woman who was mad that her husband bought a certain machine. And so now we had to put in in the thing for them to sign that they were given a choice.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? How many things that we learn to put into the contract.
Mm-hmm.
For myself as a coach, it was people not showing up on time, and and then they expected us to go overtime because they were 10 minutes late. So in the contract, it's like, this is the time will be like, if we have a 1 hour session, it ends at the time we said, even if you're 10 minutes late. Like, I can't push everybody else. And so, I mean, sometimes it's the simplest things that you think are common sense.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that you have to document, as you just said, Selena. Okay, so documentation is key. Any other thoughts around processes? Because I think this could be really helpful, especially for early business owners. Anyone else have something they might have implemented or instituted in their onboarding process or as an ongoing part of their business? Oh yeah, Heather's saying if her clients are late, there's a fee for that. Yeah. Or cancellations as well. Maybe we'll talk about later. Rose, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'll do is anytime I have a verbal conversation with a client, be it a phone call or something like that, I'll follow that up with a text or an email,
Yes.
just to confirm that we're all on the same page as to what we discussed in the phone call. Because frequently you can come away from a conversation with two different interpretations of what happened and what was agreed upon. But when it's in writing, it's a little bit harder um, to have those misunderstandings that can happen.
Absolutely. I learned that early on as well. Documentation. It could sometimes be a language barrier, but sometimes it's just the way we communicate or what we remember, right? So I think that is brilliant. I do that as well. I think that's a really great idea. I just was speaking to a client earlier this week who had something set up. It was, I'll just keep it in general terms. It was a presentation, and then like 2 days before, the company canceled it. And so because she didn't have a cancellation policy, that's another thing. Like what is that can cause conflict, right? That's resentment and bitterness because now I just lost that money. But if we don't have in writing what our cancellation policy is, and that comes up all the time. Yeah, Leah is saying she saves all the chat and captions from the meetings and turns them into notes for verification. Very smart. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's move on to another type of a question. How do you know it's time to fire a client or walk away from a client or customer situation? Have you ever fired a client? By the way, you are entirely allowed to do that. But has anyone been in that situation? How do you know it's time for that to happen? Anyone have that experience? Just time to walk away, time to cut the losses. Anybody have experience with that before? I'll go to my second screen. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody on my second screen. It hasn't, Helen, I'll let you go, and then Victoria after you. Go ahead.
Um, for me, I put a contract in place with everyone that I work with. And for me, I guess it comes down to respect. If the client isn't upholding their part of the contract or continually asking me to bend the rules, particularly on things like payment or deliverables, the sort of hard and fast rather than softer stuff, then, you know, if they don't respect me, I have a hard time respecting them, and they end up being someone I don't want to work with.
Right. If somebody doesn't pay you the first time, for me, that's a red flag right away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure that we are going further on that. By the way, just before we go to Victoria, that's another lesson learned from me on my part was getting deposits ahead of time, especially if it's a larger project. And many people in the WE-CAN community I've heard from have had this situation. They might do a 3-month project and invoice at the end and don't get paid. But of course, if you are asking for a 50% deposit up front, then at least you're getting a portion of that money. And, you know, that's something that many of us have learned along the way as well. Victoria, I want to kick it over to you. Yeah, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yeah. So, excuse me.
No worries.
I'm actually a goldsmith, so a lot of my clients would be coming to me for custom design and that sort of thing, and that's usually where the biggest cause of walking away from a client is, because you might present them with designs. They'll come to you, you do several sketches, you start going through the process, and you realize this person has no idea what they want. And so you just sort of say, you know what, maybe you need a bit more time to think on this. Or
Yeah.
you're coming to the realization that they, you know, I don't do particularly natural and flowing designs. Mine are more geometric and architectural in style, and they want something flowing and natural. It's like, I can't, a moment.
We've all done that. Usually I'm talking to my dog. Oh, you're off. You're off mute. You're on mute now.
Sorry, that was my spouse. He was just making himself a coffee and he turned the kitchen light off and I lost my light.
Yes,
Sorry,
you were saying you're geometrical. They were maybe more flowy
yes,
in design.
thank you. I had a brain injury several years ago, so I lose track of my conversation. So thank you for that. Yeah, so sometimes, like, obviously, because I've gone to college, so I know people like in my cohort that do that kind of thing. I can be like, maybe you should go see them.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah,
So
that's a really good way to handle that.
yeah,
So,
and it does come up fairly frequently because people will see you on like Instagram or social media and go, oh, I love your work, I love this, I love that, or they like your personality, but you don't mesh design design wise.
Yeah, I love that. I love how also you're not taking that personally. Like, and I think that often when we go into conflict and it's not a fit, we take that like either we think we have to become what they want, right? People pleasing 101, or we feel offended or I guess worried about telling them, hey, this is
Yeah.
not the right fit. But I love the idea of referring to someone else because it is just a bridge to, you know, show them that they could still have their needs met, but maybe we're not the right one for that. And, you know, on that note, I mean, let me pause though to see if anyone else has any answers to that question. Uh, how you know when it's time to either fire a client or let's say nicely walk away. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? By the way, I didn't really
I
tell
don't
you
know how
this,
to
but
put my hand up.
oh yeah, I was gonna say, sometimes I don't see the hand. So if you use your reaction button at the bottom, then it goes to the top of my screen. So I apologize if I missed anyone. Yeah, there should be somewhere there, but go ahead, Heather, because I see you. You're in the middle of my screen now.
I don't have a reaction button. I don't know. It's on. I'm not.
There is something at the bottom that says react and then raise hand. So everyone's Zoom should have, it should say like chat, and beside that there's like a heart that says react. And then anyways, that's where it's buried in there. If you can't find it, no worries. Just flail about,
It
flail
doesn't
your
work. I don't
arms,
know.
and hopefully I will see it.
Anyway, I was just gonna say, like, how do you know when to? I say when I start getting like stressed, when it's stressing me out. I'm thinking to myself, this isn't why. I mean, stress about it's an exciting project and it's busy and that type of thing is fine. But when I'm getting stressed out because they're not responding or the way that they're responding is not appropriate. And
Right.
Actually, with one client that I worked with, the next time they asked me to do some work with them, I just charged them a lot of money. I thought if I have to deal with that stress,
Yeah.
and they
Yes.
didn't take me up on it, and I was okay
Yeah.
with that because I just thought if it's
Yeah.
going to cause me that much stress, they'll have to pay.
Right. Yeah. And I've had people say that, like, I'm sorry, I'm fully booked, right? I mean, we don't have to, like, I'm not saying we all have to lie, but it's like, I am not accepting that type of work right now. Or, there's all sorts of things. And in fact, that's my next question is, what are some of these scripts? What are some of these phrases maybe that we can use that might help ease the stress of, either not just firing a client or letting them go, but also approaching conflict? What are some ways that you've learned? I'll share one of mine. Maybe it will inspire something. So if I have someone who's approaching me, and I have had in the past for different reasons, and sometimes, like Heather said, sometimes it was undiagnosed, not undiagnosed, but I didn't know that there were certain issues going on, right? Whether it was personality or health. And so my phrase is immediately, and also gives me pause, is like, I hear what you're saying, right? Usually they're upset about something. And so when I say, I hear what you're saying, I'm not agreeing with them, but I am acknowledging that they have something to vent or they have a point of view. And then also, it just gives me a moment to think about it. And I think a lot of times people will sort of blow up in a little bit of a way if it's that sort of conflict where they just need to vent. And maybe it's not even about you, it's not about the work, but it's something. And so sometimes I'll be like, I hear what you're saying. And so it's kind of like, I know Mackenzie said she's a therapist. You also have to adopt some of that therapy language. It's like reflecting back, like, I hear what you're saying. So what I'm hearing you saying is, that such and such. So anyways, that's one of my phrases that I use, even if it's an email. Like, I'll say, thank you so much. I appreciate, I hear what you're saying, but that doesn't, for me, mean I'm agreeing with them. It just is that they're heard. So are there any phrases maybe or language around dealing with conflict that you have helped? Because that might help somebody else in the room. Dealing with conflict isn't the easiest thing. It is stressful. And women typically have been socialized not to be instigators or, of course, we're there to keep the peace, not rock the boat, all of those things. Anything that's helped anyone else in the room? Victoria, sure, go ahead.
This actually isn't this isn't helpful. It is more something that I used to notice when I did shows and that sort of thing, was that people would come up and their immediate response, because again, I work in gold and silver and like real gemstones and that sort of thing, is, oh, that's so expensive. Or I can go and get that at Walmart or something like that. And I know where it's coming from,
Yeah.
but I don't know how to respond. And it could lead to a potential for conflict. So a lot of the times I just wouldn't say anything, which is really bad. So I don't know if
let's
we
throw
can.
that out to the group, that maybe somebody has been in that situation. We've all heard that, by the way.
Comes up. Yeah.
Yeah, I can get this cheaper somewhere else, or I could make that myself, or I could do this myself. Does anybody have language around that? That maybe you've dealt with that. I'm just checking the chat as well. Oh, there's lots I've missed, sorry, but I'm just gonna zip down here. Yeah, Muriel saying I could make that myself. Selena, what's your experience been?
There we go. So yeah, I've said to clients, because they say I can buy that online for cheaper, and I say, well, then you don't have me to
Mhm.
come to, and
Ah,
you're coming to me now with questions or issues, and if you buy it online, I won't be doing that for you.
mm,
And in the long run, if you're buying all these things online, we won't be here. This company won't be here. And
right.
when you need us, we won't be here. So,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it's an unfortunate reality of the online shopping, and I can get things at Amazon, but
Yes, I
yeah,
can see
that's
that.
what
That's a good comeback. I like that. Helen, what are your thoughts?
Um, my favorite approach is generally some version of it's not you, it's me. So that I'm not sort of pointing the finger, but when someone says I can get that for less, or some version of, you're not good enough for me, or
Yeah.
something like that, my response is something like, I encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
Meaning, we're kind of done engaging here. If you've
Yeah, yeah,
already
yeah.
decided that I'm not what
Right.
you want, I
Yes.
release you. Go ahead and do
Right.
whatever it is you think you need to do.
I love that. I love that. And Muriel, I have to read out her comment below here because I love Muriel. She says, I have a smile that is so sweet, it sends them into a diabetic coma. I maintain my grace and calm, so no matter what, or no matter what. I add that my pieces are of the highest quality materials that will never give them a rash or an unpleasant allergic reaction, which, let's be honest, a lot of Amazon jewelry does. Thank you for that, Muriel. Laura, over to you. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm fortunate because I work in mobility training with seniors, so we have
Mm,
goals built in right from the beginning. But I
nice.
think because all of this can become pretty personal,
Yeah.
whether it's your service that someone doesn't want, or if you do have to release someone from your service, I think if you go back to looking at goals, and it sort of takes
Mm,
it out of the personal, and whether it's something that you're physically making or a service that you're providing, if you sort of approach it from um, perhaps I'm not the person to help you meet your goals, or it
mm.
might
Yeah.
take it out of the personal a little bit.
Yeah, because it's really hard not to take it personally, which is another question I have in a moment. So you've already foreshadowed that. Thank you, Laura. That's a great response. Rose, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts run along the lines of like if it's in a busy, it depends on the scenario. Like if it's at a
Sure.
show and you're in a busy, crowded place and somebody's just passing by and being like, oh, that's a little bit expensive, then I don't know if you have to respond to that
Good
necessarily.
point.
Versus if it's somebody who's like stopped a while and is really interested in your pieces, and then they're talking about the price of them or
Yeah.
the quality of them, then you can speak to that a little bit more and engage in that conversation. Yeah, like share the cost of materials, share the cost of manufacturing, and that sort of thing. Versus just like, oh, a comment from somebody who's not interested,
Yeah.
where their education isn't going to give you any benefit versus um, versus somebody that you can talk to and explain why it's a good idea to invest in high quality pieces instead of purchasing it online and that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
I think that's a really good call because it's like the level of their interest and like were they all, is it an objection? Is it literally a sales objection, right? That they are a bona fide possible customer. If they're not, they're just not. And yeah, so that's valid. Like, do they need some more education as to what they're receiving? Maybe there's confusion about that, and maybe they don't know the difference. And so that's so, and so that becomes a part of our sales process then is educating people for sure. I love that. Leah in the Zoom chat has said, I always say, okay, you're learning from people who have not lived in your shoes and overlook small things that I can support because sometimes they don't even, they're not aware of all the things that you offer. So that education piece, I think is really great. So I want to go back to, I think it was what maybe Laura had touched on, was this idea of taking it personally. So let me ask something about self-care after maybe you've encountered someone who has either denigrated what you're doing, like, oh, I could get that on Amazon, or I can make that myself. Like that, we take a hit. Like that's just, it does. It hurts when that happens. Or we've had a blow up with a client. And I don't know how many of you have had that. I've certainly had some not fun run-ins with people because people are people. So, what role does self-care play for you after dealing with a particularly draining or confrontational client? How do you manage that? Because here's the thing, I think if we don't deal with that, or have a process even for taking care of ourselves after those things happen, it can linger, it can keep us up at night, it can turn into things like really bad habits, health-wise, and substance abuse. I've seen all sorts of things in the business world. So maybe Joanne, you can kick us off there. How do you take care of yourself when things do get personal sometimes, or at least we take them personally?
Yes, and I'm learning that, also like the negative can be so big compared to the positive.
Sure.
So I did a presentation. It was almost to 100 people. It was virtual, and it was and now I'm looking at it as a lesson learned. But it was on menopause and andropause, because the majority of people there were there was only 30% of women, and most of the on the call were men. And so I talked to HR and I said, well, do you want me to also talk about andropause? And anyways, so I'm trying to make it short here, sorry. So the context of the of this presentation was on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I thought, oh, I'll bring in the man. All right. So I revamped my workshop, and HR was okay with it. So I did my presentation. It seemed to be going well. Everything was fine. I got some good feedback, except for one.
Mm.
One lady, oh my God, she was brutal.
There's always one. In a
And
group of 100, let's acknowledge, in a group of 100, yeah. So how did you deal with that?
I was that one like hurt. That
Yeah.
one was, oh my God, I was feeling
Mm.
so like it hit me to the core.
Yeah.
But then I realized, right? So basically, she was saying that it was not DEI and inclusion, and that I was not professional.
Mm. Ouch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ouch.
This is supposed to be DEI. We're supposed to be talking about women. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I realized that for this woman, I realized and make, lesson learned that this was a menopause, teaching everybody about the menopause and all this, me bringing in the andropause, but which HR agreed with. But again, it was only this person. It made me realize, okay, I really have to be cognizant of the DEI, or woman wanted to be heard.
Sure.
But then I realized, okay, and my husband too, Joanne, it's only one, why are you amplifying the one when the other, 90 had good feedback? So I think it's I'm still, a little about it.
We can remember something a year later. We remember the one comment, right? So
Yeah.
I like how you framed in terms of, okay, it was 1 out of 100. We have to reframe that, right? Which is just sort of, again, a process. That's a self-care tool. It's not always easy and it doesn't always work immediately, let me acknowledge. But we're like, okay, it was 1 of 100, Kerry. It was just one. And yeah, so that framing of it, is that how you basically, well, like you say, you still are thinking about it, which we do.
Yeah, and
We absolutely do.
Lynn says, how was she brutal? Maybe for me it was brutal. Maybe,
Sure.
you
No,
know,
and
I
we've
mean,
been there. I think everyone is thinking of a comment right now from their that they've received. Thanks for that, Joanne. Absolutely. That's a great example. Anyone else with, like, again, how are you taking care of yourself then? How do we manage our thoughts or even our well-being when we have stepped out of a conflict or we're in conflict. How do you do that? And I think, sometimes these are things you might do naturally, but would be helpful to share with someone else. I've got some thoughts on this. I definitely have developed over time. Anyone else have self-care methods? Heather, what are your thoughts?
Well, I keep putting my hand up. I'm sorry.
Please, that's what we're here for.
You know what? One thing that's been really helpful for me is to get business buddies. And as soon as something happens, I have a couple people that I don't reach out to all of them, but I'll pick somebody and just, talk it through with them so that I deal with it immediately. I do the same as Joanne. I'll talk to my husband, but he's not always the best person. He's great, but he's not the best person from a business perspective to help me put it into perspective and deal with it at the time so that I don't have this lingering. And then when it comes up again, I'll do the same thing. This is driving me crazy. I'm thinking about this, what somebody said to me, and mine is typically, you're really expensive.
Yeah. That's because you're worth it. Yeah. I think debriefing with a peer is one of the best tools we have. It's free and we can do that. And so think of if you don't have a business bestie yet, and I say a business bestie because like Heather and Joanne, my husband's not in business. He doesn't care about business, but he will just, support me, but not understand the business part. So find someone, whether it's in the WE-CAN community or in your local area, a business coach, a therapist, whatever it is, find someone that you can have in your corner. Selena, over to you next. How do you kind of create that self-care for yourself after or during conflict?
Well, usually what I've done, I used to have somebody who used to be my manager, and he did my job before me, so I could always talk to him. So he was a good, to tell me it's okay, or give me suggestions of how to handle it in the future. But now he's not around anymore. So oftentimes I'll go home thinking about it. And once I get home and I'm with my dog, I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter that much to my life. My life is still good with, it doesn't, it shouldn't bother me that much. So I just kind of talk myself down and realize that it's not really that important to my life.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned your dog. For me, just like often it'll be a Zoom call for me. So I will just say it's time for a walk and we will just move our bodies. So movement is actually a really great way, although it's healthy for us, it's good for us. But I find when I move, the stress dissipates and I'm able to think a little more clearly rather than if I'm still there at that computer, it can really generate some negativity and I can spiral. But movement, for me, it's with my dog. Yeah, Leah says, our dogs know everything. We tell them everything, probably more than we tell our partners. So that release of stress physically, I think, is a great self-care method. And somebody earlier mentioned the idea of celebrating or setting boundaries, right? Sometimes we have to, celebrate those boundaries too, right? Remind ourselves why they're important, why they're in place, and this idea that every difficult client is practice, right? And standing firm for yourself and what you believe. So just like high-fiving yourself, like Mel Robbins in her book talks about, if you've read that one, high-fiving yourself or like celebrating in some way, in a healthy way. I think celebrating that we handled it, and we need to do that, especially if we're solopreneurs. Like put your hand up, like physically, if you're a solopreneur, you are the only person in your team, right? Sometimes we can't turn to the desk next to us. Yeah, a lot of us are solopreneurs. So just some thoughts around that. Okay. Let me just find another question here. These are good. Thank you for your answers. I guess here's a question about what's the difference between a client who's difficult and one who simply has high expectations. Recognizing, and this says almost more about us now, right, in how we frame people. What's the difference between someone who's difficult and someone who just has high expectations? Does anyone have any thoughts around that? Because sometimes we can misinterpret, what's being said. Somewhere again in the communication process, we lose that element of, maybe it's just that they have high standards. Has anyone encountered that before? Maybe it's just me. Helen, what do you think?
I think clients that have high standards can tell you what those standards are. If you do this, this, and this, or if this is the outcome, they're happy when you do that, even if it takes a couple of steps to get there. My sense of difficult clients is that it doesn't matter what you do for them, they're never happy.
Yeah, good point. Brittany in the Zoom chat says someone who has high expectations will want service but won't cross boundaries. I like that distinction, right? And someone earlier mentioned respect. Someone can have high expectations and still respect you and your work, right? They don't denigrate your work, which I think is important. Sometimes we put up with things, and I have met clients where like that's kind of sometimes the role of a coach is to say that's not okay, right? And just have, or somebody on the outside of your situation, just sort of look at that through a new lens and say, I don't think that's okay how they're treating you, right? And maybe you've done that for another business bestie before. So yeah, Ashley says people with high expectations can typically communicate what they want more clearly than difficult clients. I like that distinction. Very, very true. Maybe they have some more experience, right, than others. And I'm trying to get to as many here. Sarah is saying high expectations in difficult clients can be differentiated through communication. Ask for clarity, make yourself clear, right? And ask for clarity if that is the situation. So I just wanted to frame that because sometimes we will label people difficult if they like make us a bit uncomfortable, but sometimes that discomfort is an opportunity for us to grow, right? There are moments, and I don't want to overlook that, we could maybe fix some things. And I think that there's opportunity. Sometimes I like difficult clients because they reveal gaps. Ooh, I need a contract there. Ooh, I need a policy there. Has anybody ever created a policy because of a difficult client? I know I have. I'm like, oh, if I had a cancellation policy, that would be clear and we wouldn't be having this difficulty. Sanya, I see you're agreeing 100%. I'm sorry, I think you're on my second screen. Did you want to speak to that? Are you able to speak to that on camera? What you mean
Yeah,
by,
for
yeah,
sure. My video's not working, but
no worries, go ahead.
yeah, I've definitely like over the years added things to my basic contract to just more clearly communicate, like everyone's saying, to really communicate what it means in the different parts of our relationship and how that progresses, right? So like what does a notice mean? What does like all those little things mean? And as well as like having feedback check-in points, because like knowing this situation that happens in onboarding, for example, in my role where like we onboard a client and get them into their processes. Like, what does that mean? And like, this is a difficult part that happens. And so let's talk about that beforehand. And we make that part of the process and part of the like policies or the contract wherever it makes most sense to communicate that expectation.
I love that. By the way, if there's anyone on the call who is a WE-CAN client and doesn't have a contract, you're like, I don't even know where I would get a contract. If you're a registered WE-CAN client, we work with the Queen's Business Law Clinic. We can help, we can get you a client or you can meet with them. You can develop your contract for 100% free, right? All of that lawyerly support is free. So definitely suggest that. Marie-Therese, did you have a comment? Sorry, I just was gonna go to you. No, oh, okay, sorry. I'm just gonna put you. Okay, so my last question for you folks is how can we support each other as women entrepreneurs in navigating these challenges? Because this is what community should be for. This is why we're here. How you might just, put out an ask, or you could say, here's how I can support someone else, or just as a group, how can we as women entrepreneurs support others when it comes to dealing with difficult customers and clients? And by the way, thank you. I forget who it was who suggested the topic for today's virtual cafe. Like I see that as my role as the project manager is when someone brings up a topic like this, let's talk about it. So that's sort of my role from here. So anybody like, how can we work together to do this? I'll pause as you think about that. Because I think that's the role of a community, right? Not that we finish this call, we go away and we're on our own again. Like, we can go beyond Zoom in supporting each other. It doesn't just have to be when we come together for a virtual cafe. Has anybody, experienced this where they are supporting someone or they feel supported by someone else? What are your thoughts around that? Anybody would like to kick it off? Maybe it's something we think about more fully. I know it's very easy for us to get buried in our own world, right? So raising up our head every now and then to say, how can I help someone else? Yeah. So Heather, over to you. Kick it off.
And I think I mentioned the business bestie. I mean, I reached out to people that do the same thing as me. Sometimes you think that you're in competition, but most, you're just not.
Yeah.
Really, when you start talking to somebody who does a similar job or business as you, you start talking, we really are differentiated in some way. And that is so helpful. And especially as women, I just, I had to take the leap a couple of times to do that, and felt a little bit uncomfortable. But then once I did it, I realized they're having the same challenges that I'm having.
Yeah.
We're talking about the exact same, we're having the same problems, or they've had the problem, and then they've been able to, come up with a solution. I found it very, very helpful.
And I love that you took the lead. Like, and I just write a permission slip for everyone on this call right now to take the lead, not to wait for someone to come to you, because we all have the power to just call up someone for a coffee chat, right? Or send the email, whatever that is. I'm just looking at the Zoom chat. Sandy, I'm coming to you next. Sarah says we can listen and coach one another. We can step into public conflict when someone is being unreasonable at someone else's business. Have you ever been in a store and someone is denigrating like handmade items? Like, I'll just turn around and say, looks awesome. Like, I'm going to buy this because this is so well made. Like, you just sort of counterbalance it. Sarah says, we can't be that person. We cannot be that person when we're upset about something. Oh, and I lost the rest of the message there. Sorry. I love how in the Zoom chat moves. Remember, the person on the other side of the conversation is a person who has stuff going on too. Yes. Sanya, over to you. What are your thoughts?
I've had a client that I worked with over 5 years who most other team members have called a difficult client. And it's one of those clients where they have really high expectations and they aren't afraid to like say it out loud. And so I found that in training other team members and like using that client as an example, I was able to process it a lot better myself and like understand taking that perspective of the client to really understand like it's not always so maybe not as clear cut as you'd think with your first emotional reaction. So like teaching someone to deal with that myself, like other junior team members and other people that are working with me, like helps me process it a little bit too.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that, just that process of, especially if you have a team going through that we realize, oh, and even today, like for myself talking about difficult versus high expectations, yeah, do we need to have some ways that we help serve these high expectation clients better, assuming they're realistic expectations, all of that. I know we do masterminds here in the WE-CAN project, which, having a micro community of women entrepreneurs is also really helpful. And so I think it's important that I'm grateful that every single one of you are a part of this larger WE-CAN community, even if you're not in the Kingston region, because these types of gatherings, sometimes I say, you know what, you might come and it's not even the topic that you think is the one that interests you, and yet you feel supported. You're able to express, or you're able to find a business bestie, right? I mean, that's sometimes, and let me throw that out. For those of you who have someone, how did you find that person? I think that's just a quick question to ask. Like, do you have someone who's in that network, and how did you find them? Because there are people who are looking for those types of folks. Let me just throw that out and ask if anybody has a thought on that, because supporting each other is one of the best, I guess, strategies for dealing with difficult people. So Muriel is saying fellow vendors that she meets at different markets, I suppose, and also the WE-CAN community. Great, thanks for that, Muriel. I know you've been a part of numerous masterminds, which is a great place to find folks as well. Helen is saying professional industries and associations. Love it. Again, where you still have to have conversations because not everyone might be a fit, right? And so that's something to think about. I'm also going to suggest something like the WE-CAN community has a free Facebook group. So if people aren't in that, by the way you find that, it's just I think it's called WE-CAN Community of Women Entrepreneurs. You can find us on Facebook. If you're on our newsletter list, you can also click through, it's at the bottom. And, sometimes I've seen people post, hey, I'd like to create, have some women for coffee to talk about this. You can be the leader and do that. So I encourage anyone to give those a try. All right, so this has been a great discussion today. I've really enjoyed it. And I believe I'm just going to go check this because I want to make sure that I am not misspeaking about our next event, because I would love to have everyone there. If you're not already on our newsletter, it's the best way to find out about when we have events coming up. So do reach out to me. You all have my email address because I sent you the Zoom link. I believe that our next session is on October the 9th. Yes, and Mackenzie's on the call today. You already heard from her a bit. She is a therapist for entrepreneurs, and her workshop is Shine Your Light. It's on October the 9th. Mackenzie, are you still on the call? Let me just check if she's there. I don't see you on my screen. I think she might have had to drop off. But that's basically about making sure that your business is aligned with your values. And it's going to be a really great, I mean, we even talked about values here today, didn't we? Like, how much do we actually value like our mental health and our well-being, right, as business owners? Lots of really great discussion is going to be coming. Brittany, if you reach out to me, I will get you that link and we'll get you registered. So same time, which is 10 a.m. actually on October the 9th is the date of Mackenzie's workshop. It's more of a workshop than discussion, although I'm sure there will be discussion. Reach out to me if you're interested in that, or just get on the regular newsletter list, because then that way you get everything on every week on a Monday. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I hope you feel a little bit more equipped, maybe a little more empowered to deal with difficult situations and people because they pop up. That's just life. Life keeps on lifing. Thank you so much for your input, for listening, and for your comments in the Zoom chat. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Thank you. Take care.